Thank you for the opportunity here to share my passion for the neotropics, neotropical birds. We call this a personal journey, so I'll briefly go a little bit about my personal journey that led me to essentially almost 25 years of being associated with neotropical birds one way or the other. So I'll quickly go over that. And as Steve mentioned, as I was starting to put this together, it became very clear that there's no way to do justice to something as rich as the neotropics in 1 hour or in one talk. And so even if I try to cover each family with like one or two photos of each family, there was no way we're going to be able to get everything done. So we decided to split this into 2 talks. And today I'll talk about the non-passerines. I'll briefly talk about the difference between the passerines and non-passerines. I'll go through that. So to start, I'll turn off my camera here, but I think hopefully if there is any problem with the sound, Steve will let me know. Okay. So first of all, what is the neotropics? So just to cover that, that's the New World tropics. And trying to get my slides to proceed forward. Interesting. Sorry for the logistical issues here. Not sure what's happening, why it's not letting me move forward.
Well, you can't advance it?
Let me try a different thing here, maybe a different keyboard. Okay, that works. I've switched the keyboard. All right, so sorry for that interruption there. So what are the New World tropics? So it's as the name implies, it's the New World, and it's a tropic. So between the Tropic of Cancer and Tropic of Capricorn. So somewhere basically just around the US-Mexico border, south till through the middle of Argentina. But when we talk about the neotropics in a bird sense, actually all of South America and Central America gets included in the neotropics. As one of the richest regions for birds, between those 2 continents, Central and South America, it's probably close to 4,000 species. There's 3,400 just in South America alone. And if you look at some of the top countries in terms of number of birds, and this is data I pulled together from the BirdLife International, you can see that the top 3 countries, Colombia, Peru, Brazil, they're in South America. We get Indonesia because of all the islands, it gets a lot of endemics and it's pretty high up there. But then the next 3 again are in South America. And what's even more amazing is the diversity. If you look at this number of species by by area, you can see that Costa Rica, 16 species per 1,000 square kilometers. And it's roughly the same number of species as the USA, but it's a much smaller area. So it's just absolutely loaded with birds. So that's what makes the neotropics of interest to birders. But my interest started, before even I knew much about birds. And I was in India, I was growing up there. My mother used to teach at a college, and she had access to the library there. And she used to get me National Geographics there, which I used to read from end to end, every page of of those magazines. And this particular edition was really sort of life-changing for me. This was in, I think it's the 1983, and it was about the rainforest. Many years later, I found the online version, and I was able to get the screen clipping of it. So this, and in here, in the last page, when they talk about on assignment and they have a little bit about the photographers, this particular photograph of these 2 photographers sitting, and this is in Costa Rica somewhere, and it started raining and they pulled this big leaf and used it like an umbrella. There was something about that photograph that just stayed with me. And somehow it just it intrigued me a lot, and just there was something about this. So it's the power of pictures. So that burnt something in my brain. And I used to watch nature shows, and there was the show, I'm sure some of you remember, from David Attenborough. It's called Living Planet, and it had an episode on the jungles, and it was a totally devoted to the rainforests of the world. And I used to watch that. We only had one channel in India in those days, so they would sometimes show that over and over again, and I would always look forward to those reruns. And then there was another nature show from BBC called The Flight of the Condor, and it was 3 episodes. And the third episode of that was the journey. It was somewhere in Ecuador, where they go from the top of the Andes all the way to the Amazon rainforest, all the way through basically a transect of the Andes. And that was, again, one of my favorite episodes. And then in Delhi Zoo, we had macaws. And I remember the first time I saw the macaw as a kid. There was a scarlet macaw and a hyacinth macaw. I just couldn't believe that there could be something like this that exists. And the little caption on the cage said that it's found wild in South America. So it became my ambition to go see the macaws in the wild. And so eventually, when I got to college, I actually got into birds in my junior year. And this was, in fact, the first bird that got me hooked. This was a golden oriole. So that's how my interest in birds developed. And then eventually, I started getting engaged in a nature club there. So we went to this World Wildlife Fund, or WWF camp. And this is me down in there. This was a college kid. In South India. And that was the first time I realized that India has rainforests too. And there's some fabulous rainforests. It's a center of endemism. And so that was my first real experience. I still wanted to get to South America, but at least I started getting a sense of what the diversity of a rainforest was like. And I saw these giant hornbills, or great pied hornbills. This picture was taken later. But that just sort of, if anything, it just sparked my interest even more to eventually get to the rainforest. So eventually I came to the grad school. I went to Princeton, and there, being an international university, you get to meet different people. And so, by the way, I started birding when I reached, I was in New Jersey for 5 years. I started birding there, and this northern cardinal was the bird that triggered it for me in terms of the interest in North American birds. But being in an international school, you get to interact with multiple students and other students from other parts of the world. And one of them gave me this book, The Birds of Colombia. And to this day, I still think this is one of the best field guides ever written. It's pretty old now, but the way Steve Hilty writes the descriptions of the birds in a very small, compact fashion, you can actually read it like a little novel. So I used to pore over this book for hours and hours, and was trying to plot a way to somehow get to South America. And eventually I found, and I was a grad student, I didn't have much money, but there was a University of Missouri was offering a course on tropical ecology. It was like a 1-week course, which basically was a field trip to Peru. So I signed up with them, and eventually I ended up in Iquitos. So if you can see my cursor here, so this is Iquitos. It's about 3,000 miles from the mouth of the Amazon. There's still no roads there. Roads are creeping up now, but even now there are no roads to get to Iquitos. So you either have to fly or you go by boat. So we flew directly to Iquitos, and eventually I ended up there. This was 1995. It was still, the infrastructure hadn't fully developed. Now there are hundreds of lodges. Back then there weren't that many. And I was with a bunch of college kids. None of them were birders. I was the only birder. So I was birding on my own. But I finally, got to realize this lifelong dream of being on the Amazon. And, it was great to be with this group of students who were not birders, because then we got into insects and mammals and all kinds of stuff, and, the basic rainforest experience. So everything I imagined it to be, it was there. My one regret, though, was I didn't actually see one of the big macaws. So if you look at the plates from Peru, these are like the 6 species of macaws that are seen there. So I was hoping to see the scarlets and the red and green, but I only got to see the chestnut-bellied and the red, the chestnut-fronted and red-bellied, which basically look like large parakeets. They don't really look anything like a macaw. So I still wanted to get to see I was waiting to see my macaw, but I did, I only had binoculars, no camera, but this was my first bird photograph ever. This was a tropical screech owl. It came and basically flew right over my bed. This was like a camp. There weren't any rooms there. There were just thatch roofs and no walls. So birds could just come right up in. And with my little point and shoot camera, I managed to get this picture. So that was my first bird photo. I saw about 150 species. There was no guide to birds of Peru at that time. We were using birds of Colombia. It was pretty hard. But every one of those 150 species, I still remember the circumstances of how I saw them. And so I still was waiting to come back there. Now, even with all those limitations, I was able to make my own little minor contribution to Peruvian ornithology. This is a red-breasted meadowlark, or a red-breasted blackbird. And I saw this, I put it on my checklist, and I posted a checklist. This was the early days of the web. There was no eBird. There was nothing like that. So I just made a little website, put some of my pictures, and I put up the checklist of the birds I saw. And then somebody contacted me, and they said that they were putting together the checklist of the birds of Iquitos. And this was the first record, or confirmed record, of this bird from Iquitos. It's basically a bird that's spreading along with deforestation. And it hadn't come all the way to Iquitos. It's further downriver in Brazil. But this was the first record. And if you go see now the range maps, you will see that for the range map for this species, there's one little dot in Iquitos. So I think that maybe I contributed to it. Of course, now it's spreading a lot. And if you go to eBird, you'll see that wherever there's deforestation, that bird is spreading. But I still hadn't gone to the Andes. I still wanted to see that. This is another book I would highly recommend. This is a classic, The Birds of the High Andes. So would keep looking at that. And then I met Thomas Valkey. He was a graduate student at Princeton. He's a very well-known Peruvian ornithologist now. And he's discovered several species, but back then he was a graduate student. And he and I used to hang out together. And he told me that, well, if you want to see macaws, you need to go to Manu. You need to go to Southeast Peru. And he drew me a little map of Manu. And at that time, it wasn't very well known. It was off the beaten track. And so I was highly motivated then to say, okay, I have to figure out a way to get to Manu. And a few years later, when I graduated and got a job, I moved to California. I found somebody who was leading a trip to Manu, and I signed up with them. And that's how I ended up on my own, kind of retracing the flight of the condors, third episode. We kind of start up high in the Andes. So this was just east of Cusco. So you start on the dry side, then you go over the crest of the Andes, you go to the wet side, you start seeing the cloud forest, the clouds coming in, waterfalls, just lush greenery, rivers. And this is an area that's like a biodiversity hotspot. This transect from the top of the Andes to the lowland rainforest in Manu, on the main road to Manu, it's about 1,000 species of birds. So this was just an unbelievable experience. This is what was at that time, the Cock of the Rock Lodge was very basic. Now it's a much more well-developed lodge. This is along the famous Manu Road. And eventually we got down to this right at the edge of the lowlands. This is a mirador, or a lookout. So you can see this is the Madre de Dios River. This just untouched rainforest, just this vast expanse in front of you. Now remember, this was 25 years ago. Things have changed now. But right here in the afternoon, we kept seeing one species after the other of macaws coming in. So this is a picture of a scarlet macaw taken much later. But sitting here on one spot, we had multiple species of macaws. And so I got all of them there in one afternoon. This is the blue-headed macaw. So this was taken later. And again, these pictures were taken from later trips. But you have the red and green, the scarlet, the blue and yellow, chestnut-fronted, red-bellied, and there was even a military macaw, which I didn't get a picture. So many species of macaws, which basically tells you the quality of the rainforest there. But finally, I got my macaws in the wild, and so it was like a realization of a lifelong dream. So that was great, and it was a complete journey. So this is, you go down the river, you start up near the foothills, 7-8 hours by boat. These are the native tribes there. It's a complete experience. You get the the canopy tower, you get your eyes are open to the whole ecosystem of the canopy, which is like entirely in different rainforest ecosystem. But you also see deforestation. This is the classic slash and burn. You know, the local settlers will chop down the trees, they burn them. That gives them enough fertilizer to last a few crop cycles. Then they move on. Right? This is what's and now, of course, well, slash and burn was bad enough. What's worse now is the commercial agriculture that's taking place in the Amazon, in particular in Brazil. But anyway, we won't dwell too much on the sad side of things today. It's more of a celebration of the birds. And we got the full experience. This was a little airport in Manu. So we flew out from that airport, a little rickety plane. Over the years, I've had these kind of experiences again, where you still often, when you want to get to remote places where some of the birds are, you end up flying on these local airstrips, unless you can go by boat. And then finally, also did the Andes. So this is Abra Malaga. This is a legendary pass up in it's near Cusco, and you go up to 14,000 feet. This is the Veronica Glacier. This is one of the sources of the Amazon. And long ago, or maybe in the 1980s, I should say, not long ago, the LSU, or Louisiana State University, used to do a series of bird ringing or bird studies there, and they discovered several species of birds, which are confined to the polylepis, or these high altitude forests up here. So the east side, you do the polylepis forest, or on the west side, then you go to the east side, and you get basically again the cloud forest, huge flocks of birds. So it was just amazing. And unfortunately, it was before I started photography, so I have nothing to share other than my memories. So this is something that changed in my subsequent trips. So since that time, which was 25 years ago, I've traveled to many other places. And during that period of the time, I'll tell you one more trip. This is Manaus. So this is in Brazil. And what's famous or significant about Manaus is that this is the Solimões River, or the Amazon, the mainstream of the Amazon. But this is where the Rio Negro meets the Amazon. And the Rio Negro drains this whole region. This is the Guianan Highlands, or the Guianan Shield. So the Rio Negro, which is the largest tributary of the Amazon, it drains this area and it merges into the Amazon at Manaus. And we were on a boat, just a bunch of birders, and we have complete freedom to go where we want. It's our own boat, and you start exploring a different ecosystem. And this is the flooded forest, or the Warzea forest. So I got to see a complete different ecosystem than we had seen in Iquitos and in Manu with the terra firme, which is more of a terra firme. Here, this Warzea. So this is the flooded forest. It's a spectacular region. And Ana Villanas is an archipelago. It's 100 or it's like actually several hundred islands in this black water river of the Negro. And the reason the Negro is a black water river is because of the topology there. There isn't a steep gradient, and the soils are pretty sandy. So the water doesn't have a very significant flow. So the leaves fall into the river, and they essentially, the tannins from the leaves, it's like tea water. So the river water almost looks like tea water. And so that's what makes it the Rio Negro. And then the famous place there is where it's called the meeting of the waters, where the black water of the Negro meets the white water of the Amazon. And it's quite an experience to be there. And this is what it looks like. You see the Negro's black water, and it's called the white water. It's really brown water. And you can see them flowing side by side without mixing for miles and miles. So that the Amazon is just an amazing place. And you begin to realize that it's a mosaic of habitats, which is what causes this large biodiversity that we see there. So this is an area, this is a type of a forest called a white sand forest. So you can see the stature of the forest. This is not very high. These are poor soils. So this is a drier, shorter stature forest. It's called a Campina. And there's another version of that's called the Campirana. And they weren't studied a lot. They used to be considered sort of quote unquote wasteland forest. But once biologists started looking in there, especially ornithologists, they started discovering species which are confined only to the white sand forest. And as they discovered more of the patches of these white sand forests, the ranges of the birds have been changing. Something that was known only from northeast Brazil, like a white-winged potu or a rufous potu, is now even found in Peru, because people found these white sand campinas and they recorded the birds, started playing their tapes, and they started seeing them elsewhere. So the Amazon is a fascinating place. And this was just sort of a dream trip. We had our own boat, so we could look at a map like this and say, okay, let's go to that little channel there, or let's go up there. And so we would just explore all these little nooks and crannies of the river. This was our pilot. This was a young guy. His name is Junior. And so he and I got along well together, and he and I would just take our boat and we would just go out even at night and look for caimans, or this little baby caiman. So that was a complete experience. So that was that phase when, before I had kids. So I was doing a different kind of exploration. After that, more in the more later years, been traveling as a family, sometimes with friends. And this was in Peru a few years ago, where I finally managed to see a harpy eagle. In fact, all of us saw it together. So that's why we were giving the thumbs up. So the last 10, 15 years, it's been sort of a different kind of birding, but it's been equally enjoyable. And my son got into birding. This is in Panama. And this is his first trip when he had his own camera. This is my wife, and we're looking at something. And it's fun to go out with kids. He's being goofy here. This is up on a canopy tower in Panama. This is where the Chagres River meets the Panama Canal. And the reason I decided to put this picture in is to talk a little about the canal, because the Suez Canal has been in the news. So the Panama Canal, it's in our hemisphere. It's an equally fascinating place. And we don't have time to get into the details, but it's a very fascinating topology of land there. And the way the canal works, the whole canal system is dependent on the Chagres River. And the water coming in for the Chagres River is what basically allows locks on both sides of the Panama Canal. And you need the rainforest there, which is why there's a protected area of the watershed along the canal is the Sobrina National Park, which is a beautiful rainforest. So we had a great trip in Panama. After that, we went as a family to Peru. There's my son there. He's taking a picture on an oxbow lake. And this is when I was giving a talk in Peru, he showed some of his slides. And so Steve gave him the opportunity to come and show some of his pictures. And that helped him get more into photography. And lately, he and I have been traveling together. This was a couple of years ago in Ecuador, where we went up to look for the newly discovered blue-throated hill star, which is a species of hummingbird, was only recently discovered. And this was high up in the Puna grasslands, so like very tough conditions there. And but eventually, this is my son's photo. He managed to get this picture of the blue-throated hill star. It was one of the best pictures at that time. A few more have been taken now that this area is known. A few of the birders are going there. But he used this picture to raise money. He's giving a thumbs up once he got the picture. And this area, the species so far is only known from one hilltop. And the American Bird Conservancy Hokotoco Foundation, they started a campaign to raise some money. They needed only $300,000 to protect essentially 600 acres, which is the entire known range of the species so far. So that has actually happened. So we did a tiny bit from our side using pictures that Vayun had taken to fundraise. And I'll leave this as a quick hook there. We still have these calendars. So if you're interested in donating to Santa Clara Audubon or SFB Bio or to Hokotoco Foundation, please contact me, and we'll give Vayun's calendar, and I'll throw in my calendar as a bonus. All right. So since that time, these red spots are all the places I've been in the neotropics. Starting right from the border of Mexico, whether it's in the Tijuana side or in Southeast Arizona or Rio Grande Valley. Then you have Belize, Mexico. You have the Petén region. This is still one of the largest blocks of rainforest. Then you get to Costa Rica, which protects around 30% of Costa Rica as protected forest. Panama, we just talked about it. This Darien region is still relatively untouched. There are other problems there which makes it very inaccessible because of drug runners in Colombia. Then you get into the Andes. This whole region is a mosaic of habitats, whether you go from the Pacific, you have inter-Andean valleys in Colombia. And I haven't yet been to Colombia, so hopefully some other day. But then the east slope, the west slope, lots of different habitats here, and just it's full of microhabitats, a lot of diversity. We talked about the Amazon here already. And then finally, if you go down to the northeast Brazil, there's the Atlantic forest there, as well as dry Caatinga forest, grasslands. Further south, where I still haven't been to Southeast Atlantic rainforest. So a lot of diversity, right? And one thing through all of this time has been, my constant has been to recreate that moment of the thing that got me inspired in the first place, that picture. So wherever I go, I try to recreate that moment. So that's my personal journey. So now, we'll jump into a little bit about birds. And so this, you probably won't be able to see this. This is like an eye chart, but this is my version of what I would call special families of the neotropics, where either endemics or near endemics. And there are about 50 or 59, 60 species or families that I'll consider kind of special to the neotropics. And a few of them, I'm sure you heard about, like, and like hummingbirds. We had a great talk last time here about the hummingbirds. Almost 300 to 400 species of hummingbirds, exclusively in the neotropics. Parrots. We also we heard a talk about parrots a couple of months ago. But then you have other things which are typical or only found in the neotropics. And maybe this is a better way of showing it. These are all the non-passerines or the non-perching birds. So the difference between the passerines and the non-passerines is that passerines have 4 toes, where the 3 toes are at the front and 1 toe is at the back. So that's a passerine. And they have a leg, the tendon structure of the leg supports their ability to clasp or grasp branches and perch on those. So anything with 3 toes in the front and 1 in the back is a passerine. Everything else is a non-passerine. So these are the non-passerines. The red dots, the green dots are, so I edited this picture and added these dots. So the green dots are endemics to the neotropics, and the blues are non-endemics. So you can see that there are certain groups, like up in the pheasants or in the birds, pheasant-like birds, which are endemic here to the neotropics. Then you go down here towards the woodpecker-like birds, so the picciforms. And you can see that there are several families there which are endemic to the neotropics. And there's actually, this is called the radiation of the picciforms or the woodpecker family, that there's something about the neotropics and the way the things evolved in South and Central America, that the woodpecker-like birds have really expanded and filled a lot of the ecological niches. So those and this is the more iconic species like toucans and trogons. So we'll talk about those today. And there are just too many birds to, like I said, to show in one talk. So we decided to just stick with the non-passerines today, go through a few of the more iconic families, and then depending on the time, I'll just rush through some of the other ones to give you a sense of what it's like, basically, hopefully give a sense of the diversity of this area. And what's fascinating about all of that is biogeography. So the reason you have this diversity is tied to biogeography. And perhaps nothing illustrates it better to me anyway than this map that I found. And this is an old map, and this is a map of the Salinidera toucanets. So what's the Salinidera toucanet? It's a bird like this. It's a small toucan, and it's a genus of 6 or 7 of these toucanets. Beautiful birds. This is a yellow-eared toucanet from Central America. And like other toucans, they eat fruit. But if you look at the range map here of different species, you can see that they don't overlap. All the different species they almost fit like a piece of jigsaw puzzle. And these red marks are things that I've annotated. And you can see that the way these things are getting divided here, like between these 2 species, there's a Guianan toucanet and the tawny tufted toucanet is the negro. So the Rio Negro becomes a separating line. And then the Amazon itself is a separating line for the Gould's toucanet or the golden collar toucanet and the forms which are further north of that. And then of course here the Andes and the Darien region splits the Central American species, which is the yellow-eared. So depending on where you are, you'll only see one species of Cylindera toucanet. And this pattern repeats over and over again with a lot of different families. And that's what makes birding in places like this so fascinating to me. And even when you're not in the field, you can spend a lot of time on field guides trying to understand what's going on. And so this is an example of all the different Cylinderas, and you can see how the range maps are separate. So to me, it's almost like, and this is my favorite group of birds. Where I am in a globe, or in this case, where I am in South America, it matters to me which species of Cylindera toucanet can I have an opportunity to see. That's how I think. So if I am somewhere in Peru, in northern Peru, I have a chance for the northern form of the golden collar toucanet. If you're in Brazil, then you have the spot-billed toucanet in the northeast. So the same pattern repeats again and again. And so that's all I'll say about geography, because you can spend a lot of time talking about this in context of every bird family. But we'll just only do this for these toucans. And then now let's talk a little bit about toucans. They're some of the most iconic birds in the neotropics, and perhaps nothing more than this bird, the keel-billed toucan, which is on, you'll see this on as a brand in any kind of a tropical product. They will use this toucan, and typically it's this one. So this is the keel-billed toucan, but and this is in Panama. This is from a canopy tower. So we saw it high up, and then it flew. And this is a composite of its flight. And I wanted it against a green background. So absolutely spectacular bird. But in many places, it overlaps with this bird, which is a yellow-throated toucan. So you can see they're very similar. And the two species are co-inhabiting the same range. And so what happens here is that there is a distinction. So this is what's called a yelper. So it makes a yelping sound, and the keel-billed toucan makes a croaking sound. So wherever in the neotropics, two of these large toucans coexist, it's typically one is a yelper, one is a croaker. And this pattern goes all the way from Central America all through South America. And so this is this is the same chestnut mandible toucan, or the yellow-throated toucan. This is in Costa Rica. Often these toucans, you'll see them together, or you see them in small groups, and which is always exciting to see it like that. So then let's move to South America, and you're from a top of a canopy tower. So here we got lucky, we got some good pictures. Typically, this is all you see. I don't know if you can see this. This right there, that's a toucan. And you have to put a telescope to see it. And from a photography standpoint, it's a real challenge to photograph these birds unless they come down to a feeder. But in Peru, there's a complication, because you get two species of toucans which are very similar, and they both have a white throat. And I'm going to show you, just because that's the best photograph I have. You can see the white throat, but there's another species like that with a white throat. And so this is a Cuvier's toucan, or it's a form of a white-throated toucan. And then this is a channel-billed toucan. So they look almost identical. The difference, again, this thing is a croaker and this is a yelper. So you have to bird by ear to tell them apart. In Southeast Peru, it's lucky because there's a small difference in their plumage too on the bill. So the base of the bill is blue here in the Cuvier's, and it's yellow in the channel bill. But the main thing is again, the yelper croaker function, so which makes a big difference. And this is another form of the channel bill toucan. This is from Trinidad. And the whole taxonomy of toucans is very confusing. But that's okay, because anytime you see one, it's still a thrill. So this is the sort of the Trinidad form, and then this is the southeast. This is the Atlantic forest of Brazil form of it, which is now called the Ariel's toucan. So those were the big toucans, and then you get to the mountain toucans. So there are 5 genuses in the toucans. So that was the first of them. This is the second one, is a mountain toucan. This is a plate-billed mountain toucan, which is the only one I have photographs of. I've seen a couple of other ones. Unbelievable colors. And this is on the west slope of Ecuador. Then you get to the smaller toucans, or what are called arasaris. And the Greek word is petroglossus or pteroglossus, which means feathered tongue. So arasaris, like toucans, have a feathered tongue. That's how they've evolved. But there are several species of aracari. So this is a collared aracari from Central America. And this is just, I like this photograph because it shows that even with the toes, even though they're supposed to be non-passerines, some of these have really strong feet. And in fact, they allow them to reach for fruit, which is what they eat. So this is a Cecropia tree, and it's going for the fruit. It's one of the favorite fruits for the species. So further south, or further west, on the Pacific side, is a fiery-billed aracari, which some people used to consider a subspecies of collared. But it's a beautiful bird. And then in the Pacific coast of South America, in Ecuador, is another fall, which is the pale-billed aracari, which is now considered a different species. But beautiful, right? And there's nothing more thrilling than to get a good picture of a toucan. This is another aracari. This is a lettered aracari. This is from a canopy tower in Peru. And then the same tower, in one morning, we had multiple species of aracaris, and this was one of my most sought after birds. This is a curl-crested aracari. Same genus. There's something about this that these feathers are curled. They almost feel like plastic feathers. And it's only one species of bird that has that. So the curl-crested aracari is relatively rare, but that morning, we actually had a whole flock of them together in a tree. So that's the thrill of being on a canopy tower, is you get these kind of experiences. And finally, a black-necked aracari. So hopefully you're getting a sense of, just how much diversity there is. And I'm just barely skimming the surface there. This is the next small toucan. This is the green toucanets, or the emerald toucanets. This is the blue-throated toucanet from Central America. And here it's eating a cicada. And you can see how large the cicada is relative to the bird. So these are relatively small toucans. And then the South American forms, you have multiple species of these ones. This is a chestnut-tipped toucanet with a white throat. This is from Peru, the east slope. And this is a crimson-rubbed toucanet from the west slope of the Andes. This is from Ecuador. And finally, we get to the salinaderas. So this is the yellow-eared. This was my nemesis bird for many years. I finally managed to get this in Panama. And this is the southeast Brazil form of it, the spot-billed toucanet. You can see the similarities. The bill is different. So, and then this is the best I could manage for my third photograph of a salinadera. This is a Gould's toucanet. So there is one more that I haven't seen. It's a tawny tufted toucanet, and it's one of my most sought after birds. Unfortunately, its traditional place to see it was in Venezuela, which is now really out of bounds. But there's an opportunity to see it from Colombia. So that's something that I hope to do one day. So let's talk about the next sort of iconic species, which are the trogons. And the trogons are predominantly neotropical. There are just a few species in Africa, a couple of species in Africa, maybe 10 species in Asia. The rest are all in South America, South and Central America. And this is one of the classic ones, the white-tailed trogon, which east of the Andes is called the greenback trogon. So the trogons just like to sit in one place. And then even though they look so colorful, they can just blend in. And unless they're calling, it's very hard to see them. But they'll fly and they'll go, whether it's a bird, whether it's a fruit or a vertebrate, that's what they go after. And this is an example of, this is another white-tailed trogon. This is from Ecuador. So this is also the greenback trogon. But this is the same bird from the back. So you can see how it blends into the landscape there. So when I used to look at trogons, I used to get very confused because there's a whole plethora of them, with some with yellow belly, some with red bellies, blue heads, green heads. But it's actually a systematic way of looking at all of them. And even though they're all of the same genus trogon, there are differences. So there is a group of birds which has yellow bellies. And this is one of them. This is a black-headed trogon from Belize. This is a gartered trogon. So this goes all through Central America. Main thing here is a yellow belly and basically a blue head. So there are several species like that. This used to be considered related to those, but now it's considered a different species. This is the only one in that group with the red belly. This is a Baird's trogon. And this is only found in the Pacific coast of Costa Rica and just the edge of Panama. So it's basically near threatened, or in fact might be vulnerable now. But this is the only one with the red belly in that group. Then you get a different group with red belly. So this is a blue crowned trogon. And then you get these forms with a black face, a black throat. This is a masked trogon from Peru. And there's a form of this called the collar trogon that goes all the way from Central America. But it has the black face, red belly. And the only one difference is this trogon. So some people consider it a different species, the orange belly trogon. And this is in Panama. This is on the Atlantic slope. Some people consider it just to be a form of a collar trogon. But you can see that there is a pattern there. So if you sort them out, they start to make sense. And they fit like a jigsaw puzzle on the map. Then you get to the black-tailed trogons. This is a slaty-tailed trogon from Central America, red bill, black tail. And this is the Amazonian form, which is the black-tailed trogon. So this was a slaty-tailed, and this is a black-tailed, but same pattern with the red belly. But then you get to the final set of trogons with the red belly, and these are the quetzals, which are the stars of this whole genus and of this whole family. This is a golden-headed quetzal. This is a view from the back. It doesn't look that spectacular. And then this is a related bird. This is a resplendent quetzal, but this is the female. And the reason I put this picture in is, again, you can see how it blends in. And the green and even the spots of light here, even a big bird like that can easily blend into the vegetation. But this is the female. And finally, you get the male. So this is the male resplendent quetzal. Some people consider it to be the most beautiful bird in the Western Hemisphere. Absolutely iconic species. This was a trip in Costa Rica, and this is my only one shot where I managed to get the full tail. And these birds are very hard to photograph, and to do justice to them, to get the full tail, and especially to get it like a horizontal form like this. Usually you get a vertical picture. So I got extremely lucky with this picture. But, that's a dream shot. So I was very lucky that we managed to get that. And then this is a close-up of that. And so these quetzals, again, they spread out. There's one form that makes all the way to Southeast Arizona. It used to be called an eared trogon. Now it's called the eared quetzal. The one difference with that is that it doesn't have these wings that come in like some of the other quetzals have. So we'll keep moving here. I'll keep moving at a fast clip to get through some of the species I want to show. So the next one I want to show are Motmots, another classic neotropical family related to, I guess in some sense related to woodpeckers. The true diversity of Motmots in Central America, but there are a few of them in South America as well. And this is one of the Central American forms, the turquoise-browed Motmot. And these are insectivorous birds. Again, they sort of sit in one place, and then they'll go and grab something. And the way they get these rackets is through wear and tear or by deliberate preening. The feathers in this section of the tail falls out. So then it becomes like a little racket. Sometimes it won't come off, and then it's just like one long tail, but otherwise this happens. So this is a turquoise-browed Motmot. And what's interesting about Motmots is when they get alarmed or they alert, they move their tails in a pendulum form. So I'll try to go back and forth here. I hope you can see that in Zoom. You can see how they move these tails. So this is a characteristic behavior in the Motmots. And this is a Trinidad Motmot. This is a form of a blue-crowned Motmot. At one time, the blue crowns were one species across most of the neotropics, but now they've been split into multiple species. So this is endemic to Trinidad. And this is the same one here. You can see that the feathers haven't completely worn out, so it looks almost like a long tail. This is Wayun. A lot of these photographs are from Wayun. And then there's a related form. This is a rufous mot. This is a rufous Motmot, so a large one. Here you don't see the tail here, but this was actually near an army ant swamp in Costa Rica. And there's a related form smaller than that, which is a broadbill Motmot. And again, here I have two pictures just to show you that even this one swings its tails like that. So Motmots are beautiful. And then this is the oddest group, and this is a toady Motmot. It's barely the size of a sparrow, and it's a Motmot. And so it's amazing the same family has so much diversity, extremely hard to see. And this was just, I was just thrilled I managed to get this little of a record shot. It was right through the bushes in Panama. Very tiny bird, but it's a fascinating species. And another very typical family in South America, the puffbirds. And they are also similar behavior. They sit in one place, usually under the crown of the trees, and they'll watch an insect fly by, they'll go and grab it. This is the what you can consider a starter puffbird. This is a whiskered puffbird, which most birders will probably see this species first. It's found in Central America. It's relatively easy to see. And there are other forms of this particular genus of puffbird. So this is a crescent-chested puffbird from Brazil. This is a black streaked puffbird from Ecuador. This is somewhat relatively rare. So there's this group of these kind of brown puffbirds. Then you get these pied puffbirds, and they have a slightly different behavior. They will actually sit on top of a canopy tower. So this is a large pied puffbird. And this was a special shot. This is a black-breasted puffbird. This is essentially restricted to Panama and Northwest Colombia. So the only place you can really see it is in Panama. And this was on the Pipeline Road in Panama. So I was pretty thrilled by that. And then you get other kinds of puffbirds. So this is, already forgotten, I'm blanking out the name of this puffbird. This is from Southeast Brazil. And this is a white-eared puffbird. This is more of an open country. So you can see that these are all puffbirds, but look at the variety here. And then this is a group of puffbirds called the nunbirds, and their genus is Monasa. So it's like something to do with the monastery of the Monasa, and I think they're just called nunbirds because their pattern of black and a little bit of white must be what gave the people the idea that there's something to do with monasteries and Monasa. So they are one of my favorites. They are classic rainforest birds. Some of them do come to the edge, and there are 4 species spread out over the Amazon. This is up in the foothills, the yellow-billed nunbird. This is the white-fronted nunbird. This is relatively widespread, even in Central America. And this is a black nunbird and black-fronted nunbird. And there's a black nunbird, which I don't have a picture of, from the Guyanas. But these are, not great photographs, but they're great birds to see. And this is called a nunbird, but this is sort of more of the potential holy grail among the nunbirds. It's the white-faced nunbird. And this was a nemesis. It's very hard to see, and I got lucky with this one in Peru. Managed to get a good photograph of that. And finally, if you have nunbirds, then you have nunlets. So this is, I guess somebody thought it looked like a nunbird, but it's much smaller. So they gave this group of birds the name nunlet. This is a rust-fronted nunlet from the bamboo forests in Peru. And finally, an oddball. This is the swallow-winged puffbird, which is probably the one that most people see because this is on the edge. And if you're on a river, taking a river journey in South America, you will see them sitting on the top of trees. They actually go after insects, like they will make sallies, and that's why they're called swallowing. They look like swallows when they're flying. So hopefully that gave you a sense of some of the marquee families. And I'm looking at the time here. I think I still have a few minutes, so I'll now quickly go through some of the rest of the non-passerine. So if the top half here, and we'll start with the tinamous. So these are pheasant-like birds restricted to the neotropics. The call of the tinamou is the call that most people will remember as their first sound of the neotropics, because these are like loud haunting calls that often, depending on the species and the time of the day, you'll get these species calling. This is an undulated tinamou. This was pretty much the first bird I heard in my first trip to Peru. I got off the boat and it was singing in the background. And I still remember its name, its call. They're mostly seen, rarely heard, or mostly heard, rarely seen. So it was quite a thrill to get a picture of this. This was in Peru. This one, it's a little tinamou. A lot of people get pictures of it now because it started coming to feeders. And so several places have started putting out feeders, and early in the morning, the little tinamous will come out. So at least we have a chance of seeing them. And this is the exact end of the other end of the spectrum, which is the great tinamou. And this was a lucky shot in Costa Rica, but they're also found all over Central and South America as well. So tinamous, anytime you get a shot of a tinamou, it's a little bit of a cause for celebration. This is a great tinamou. And the reason we were able to get this shot is, again, this is there's a feeding station in Ecuador. So they come to that. This is its own family. It's a screamer. And this picture, because my only picture of a screamer, this was on that trip to Brazil when I had a point and shoot camera and I was using slide film, and then I scanned it, but I included it here because the screamers are a uniquely South American family. And this is a horned screamer. Moving on to the ducks. Ducks are not restricted to the neotropics, but there are some very classic ducks. So this is a black-bellied whistling duck from Panama. I like this photo because it looks like a baseball pitcher on a mound with that pose. But you start seeing the black-bellied whistling ducks all the way south from the Rio Grande Valley in Texas. And this just looks like any other duck, but this is a speckled teal restricted to the Andes. But this is the classic Andean duck, the torrent duck. And it's on these fast-flowing rivers. This is near Machu Picchu, which is that the river just below Machu Picchu is a place where a lot of people get the shots of the torrent duck. So beautiful pattern. The next group, which is restricted to the neotropics, are the Guans, the Chachalacas, and the Currasows, which are essentially the pheasant equivalents in South and Central America. They are all fruit-eating birds. This is, and there are a few different genus, and one of the genus is the Pipile genus, or the piping guans. This is a Trinidad piping guan, highly endangered. It used to be called the blue-throated piping guan, which is a widespread species, but then they split it up into multiple forms, and this is the Trinidad form. Very large bird. All the guans, curassows, they only eat fruit, so they are considered delicacies, and they're hunted. And most of the range, curassows are mostly all gone because they've been hunted out. And the same happened with the guans. And in Trinidad, there's only one corner of Trinidad with a protected area where the last remaining population of these guans. So this is the genus of the piping guans. Then there is a genus, the Pipile genus, Penelope. The Penelope genus are the brown guans. This is a crested guan from Costa Rica. There are several of these all the way through the Andes. This is the Andean guan from Peru. This is its own genus. It's a watered guan. From the slope of the Andes. This is a black one, and it has this dewlap or a wattle hair. This used to be relatively rare to see, but now more and more people are seeing it with cameras. It used to be sort of a mythical bird, but a lot of people are getting pictures, and I was happy to get one of these. This is a sickle-wing guan. This is a different genus. And then there are chachalacas. And so this is different species over the geographical range, starting with the plain chachalaca in Mexico. There's a gray-headed chachalaca in Costa Rica, and keep going south. Rufous-vented chachalaca from Trinidad and northern South America, and speckled chachalaca on the Andes. Fairly drab birds, but they're very loud, and that's the name comes from chachalaca. And in the morning, you'll get surprised when you kind of almost, you'll jump out of your skin when you hear these up close because they're extremely loud and they'll startle you. So those chachalacas will. Next family, flamingos. Nothing special about them in terms of, there are flamingos in Asia as well, but there are a few in South America. And this is the American flamingo from Mexico, the famous place in Yucatan where a lot of people get these, the beautiful place with the blue waters and the pink flamingos. Next group is pigeons. South America and Central America, nothing special about the pigeons here. In fact, they mostly are these drab brown types. 4 different genuses represented here. This is the plumbeous pigeon, the same genus where we have the band-tailed pigeon. So the New World equivalents of the pigeons. So this is a plumbeous from Brazil. This is the eared dove all over Central South America. This is our equivalent of a mourning dove. And you can't go anywhere south of the border without seeing this. This is the ruddy ground dove. This is an Inca dove. You will see them in urban areas. So very common, but then you get this family of pigeons, the quail doves, which are much harder to see. And this is a white-throated quail dove. And this came out in Ecuador, again, at a feeding station. And it started coming out there, so we got a picture. Otherwise, quail doves, you hardly ever see them. They're secretive in the forest floor. But this is a uniquely neotropical group of birds. Then we come to cuckoos. This is the quintessential neotropical cuckoo, the squirrel cuckoo. In almost anywhere you go south of the border with the good bunch of trees, some sort of undisturbed habitat, even disturbed habitat, you'll see them. But this will be the first cuckoo you'll see, the squirrel cuckoo. Very large, very interesting birds. And then the anis. And the reason we like the anis is my daughter's name is Anika, and she might even be on the call today. So we just call her Ani as a nickname. So this group of 3 birds, the 3 anis, are our favorites. So this is the groove-billed ani. You can see the grooves here. This is more in the northern Central America. This is the smooth-billed ani in south of Central America and northern South America. And finally, a greater ani. So there are 3 anis. They are in the cuckoo family. What's fascinating about them is their biology, the breeding biology, where a whole group of birds will lay eggs together. It's like a communal nest, and they all lay their eggs together. And it's a very interesting and very different breeding biology. So that's what makes these anis unique. And they're open country birds, so you'll always see them. And I don't know why I throw this picture in. Oh, I see. And if you can see down here, you see a bird there. It's a nightjar. It's a pygmy nightjar. And so this is what it looks like in better light. And once it's in there, you can't see it. It's perfectly camouflage. So nightjars and nighthawks. Nightjars perch, and they sally after birds. So they'll sit on the side of the road. Common one is like a poraki, and they'll fly and catch an insect. As opposed to the nighthawks, which do long flights and they'll catch birds on the wing. So this is the least nighthawk from eastern Brazil or eastern South America. I was very lucky to get this was at dusk, very low light, and somehow managed to get a picture that's relatively decent. So those are nighthawks are all over the world, so nothing special there. But then you get to a couple of very interesting birds in South America, which are with the long tails. This is a scissor-tailed nightjar, swallow-tailed nightjar from the Ecuador. And we managed to get one sitting out in the open in the evening with its full tail showing. So these long-tailed ones are pretty unique in South America. And again, why did I throw this picture in? Oh, okay. I don't know if you can, I'll give you a second here to look for a bird in this picture. It's down here. It's a potu, a common potu. That's what it looks like. Another example of perfect camouflage. So their whole roosting strategy is to sit on the top of a snag, and they look like a broken snag, a broken part of a tree snag. And the potus are only found in the neotropics. And then this is a unique family, an oil bird. So potus are a different family, and oil birds are a different family. This is the only night bird that eats fruit, and they roost together in large caves in large numbers. And this picture was taken without flash, just with very high ISO. Just got lucky to manage to get a shot like this. And this was in Trinidad. And so oil birds are highly sought after. And they are found along the base of the Andes and in the Guianas and in Trinidad, and restricted to caves. Very fascinating bird. At one time, people used to catch them and extract oil from their feathers, which is why they get this name, the oil bird. Hummingbirds, I'm not going to go into because we already talked about them last month. I just wanted to show a couple of species which I like a lot. These are the coquettes. So the rufous-crested coquette, and in Trinidad, this is a tufted coquette. So one of my goals is to see all the species of coquettes. They're extremely hard to see, and if they don't come to a feeder, like in this case, got very lucky that it was actually feeding on a natural plant. Very hard to see. And then a couple of sort of significant photographic highlights. This is a hook-billed hermit. It's critically endangered. This was from northeast Brazil. And when I took this picture, this was on a trip with Ashok, and our guide was Ciro Albano. This was only the second picture of the species ever taken. And then the first picture was taken by Ciro himself, and then I was the second one to get it. Since that time, a lot more people have taken pictures and they're posted. But this is a bird that represents the plight of the Atlantic rainforest, where the endemic birds there are restricted to little patches of forest. So it's pretty sad. And this is another one of those, which is the Margareta's form of the great-billed hermit, which is now, at one time, it was actually considered extinct. And Ciro found this bird. And he was, again, the first photographer to take it. And then Ashok and I became like the second and third photographers. Again, because of Ciro's efforts, a lot more people are seeing this bird now. But at that time, this was one of the first photographs. Uniquely South American family, the Watzins, prehistoric-looking birds found along swamps and rivers in the Amazon. Then we come to the rails. This is the gray-necked wood rail. You see them on mangroves. Often you see them on boat when you're doing a boat ride, and with a spotlight, you can see them. Purple gallinule. This was actually taken in Florida, but it's the same species that goes all the way to South America. Beautiful blue bird. This is related to our coots and gallinules. And then this is uniquely South American, a sun grebe. And this is the best picture I have. They're very shy, and they like this sort of vegetation on the edges of water bodies, under overhanging vegetation. These are actually related to the finfoots of Africa. There's an African finfoot and an Asian finfoot, and the South American form is called the sun grebe. Another family, but it's a single bird in the entire family, is a limpkin. It's a unique kind of a shorebird. It loves snails. And this one can be seen in Florida and then all the way throughout South America. Shorebirds, nothing special about that in South America. They're the same, many of the same species as in the north, except for this one, which is southern lapwing. And we like this photo. This is Vayun's photo. This looks like a beautiful little patch of color here. We like this bird. And jacanas is a different family. So this is the northern jacana. This is Vayun's picture that actually won the youth award for the Audubon Photography Award last year. It was this picture. And then the southern form of that is a wattle jacana. So there are only two jacanas in their own family in South America. Two families represented here, the frigate birds and then the terns. The frigate birds are pirates. So they don't fish, mostly they don't fish themselves. They will harass other birds, especially terns and gulls. They'll fly after them, make them drop the fish, and then they will grab them. So this was taken in the Yucatan. Here's a frigate bird chasing a royal tern. This is another one of those families where it's a single bird. It's the entire family, the sun bittern, uniquely South American and also Central America. It likes these kind of sandy beaches, and it tends to blend in. You can probably see that it'll be hard to pick it out. But what makes it apart is that when it opens its wings, it's like a burst of color of this pattern, which I unfortunately don't have a picture of. But it uses that pattern during breeding, when it's like a sunburst. Tropic birds are their own family. They are sort of pan-tropical, multiple species here. A couple of them we are cheating here. They're from Hawaii, but they fly to the coast of South America. So there's a red-tailed tropic bird. This is a white-tailed tropic bird, and then this is a red-billed tropic bird. So the entire world has three tropic birds. You saw them all here. Storks, wood stork. This is the classic neotropical stork. Anhinga. So anhinga is the same as a darter. It's its own family, and this is the western bird, the anhinga. This is a trivia question. Which is the only bird where the family name, the genus name, and the species name is all the same? So the family is Anhinga, and this bird is called Anhinga. Cormorants are a different family, and this is the neotropical cormorant, all the way from Texas south. And pelicans. Only one pelican in South America, which is a brown pelican, the same one that we get. Even though some people think that the southern form may be a different species, a Peruvian pelican. This picture was taken in Panama along the Pacific coast. Herons, and there are a few species which are fairly typical of South America, which is one of these. This is the boat-billed heron. It looks like a night heron, but this giant bill looks like a little boat. And then ibises, a different family, and this is the scarlet ibis from Trinidad. It's a famous place, the Caroni Swamp in Trinidad, that at dusk, people go there to wait for these scarlet ibises to come in to roost. and you get this beautiful red against the green background. New World vultures, the black vulture, that, and then the turkey vulture. This is in Panama. And nothing special about a turkey vulture, but what makes it interesting down there is that there's another form similar to the turkey vulture, which is the yellow-headed vulture. This is the lesser yellow-headed vulture. At quick glance, they look the same. And the only unless you pay attention to the head, they look very much the same. And this has a little bit more yellow. But if you see it up close, which was lucky enough to do in Mexico, you can just see the rainbow of colors on its bare skin. And none of the field guides does justice to this bird. But this is a lesser yellow-headed vulture. Osprey is in a family by itself. This is from Belize. Then you get the hawks and the eagles. These are some of the classic ones from South, the swallowtail kite, the roadside hawk that you get everywhere, the snail kite, the black-collared hawk. The good thing with these things are they're relatively common. They sit out in the open, so you can at least get pictures of those. Owls. Only 2 owls I'm going to show here because one of them this is a black and white owl. This is one of 2 owls in the world which has a pattern of black and white. The other one is a black-banded owl that's also found in South America. And then this is a long-whiskered owlet, which for many years was considered, was a mystery bird. People had only heard it. It was never seen until just a few years ago. And finally, now people are able to see it. When I took this photograph a few years ago, it was so hard for me to believe that I was actually not only seeing a long whiskered owlet, I was actually taking a picture, because all through my birding career, this bird used to be considered basically a myth. Falcons, and I'm going to show one example here, a bat falcon, which is a very, very tiny falcon. And in this picture, hopefully gives you a little bit of a scale. This is found all over, but it's very small. It's very interesting. And then the caracaras are related to the falcons. And this is the northern caracara from even in Florida. But the southern form of this is the southern caracara. They're very similar. Then there are the rainforest caracaras. This is the black caracara. And then there's a yellow-headed caracara, very common. So caracaras are considered related to falcons, and they're lumped together with falcons in one family. Kingfishers, there are only 6 species of kingfishers in the New World. So kingfishers are not a big part of our avifauna here, but this is a classic one, the green kingfisher that can be seen all the way from Texas down. And this is the American pygmy kingfisher, the most fascinating one, very, very small. This is a picture in very low light with high ISO. I'm glad that actually I got a picture of one. This is an American pygmy. And jacamars, this is a classic South American, neotropical group. They specialize in eating butterflies and dragonflies. And they will even pick ones which are the mimics of the poisonous butterflies. They will go after those. So this is a rufous-tailed jacamar, one of the most widespread species. The bluish-fronted jacamar, and you can see that it's feeding on a butterfly. And they will take a butterfly and just smash it against the branch. And you can literally see the feathers disintegrating and like butterfly dust coming up. And if you see in this picture, you can see specks here, the butterfly dust as they are sort of whacking the butterfly on a twig before they eat them. So multiple species. This is what used to be called the yellow-billed jacamar, but now it's a separate species, which is why I put this photograph there. Then barbets. I talked about this in my trip to Peru, about going after this bird, which was recently discovered, the scarlet-banded barbet. So the New World barbets are its own group. This particular one took a lot of effort to go. We had to go through an extremely muddy road, fell in the mud. It was like a little adventure to get this, but finally was able to get this species. This is the red-banded barbet. This is the Capito genus. And there are other New World barbets in the Capitos, like this one, spot-crowned barbet. This is restricted to Panama and Colombia, so this is a little hard one to get. And then there's a different genus called the Ibucos. This is a red-headed barbet. So the New World barbets are different from the African and Asian barbets. And then the toucan barbets. There are 2 species in this. One is the prong-billed barbet in Central America, and then this is the toucan barbet of the West Andes. Beautiful birds. They're closely related to toucans. So the toucan barbet is like sort of intermediate to a barbet and a toucan, as the name implies. Woodpeckers, and the woodpeckers are not found in Australasia or east of the Wallace's line. A lot of species in Asia, a lot of species in Africa, but there are a lot more in South America, and in particular the piculets, which are tiny sparrow-sized woodpeckers. And there are almost 30 or 30 species of piculets in South America. And when you get one, it's exciting. And this is showing, it's feeding on a typical woodpecker behavior, where it will probe a branch, then put its tongue out and suck up or pull in the insects. They don't have a stiff tail. There's only woodpecker without a stiff tail. So they can, with their toes, they're able to sit on branches. Multiple species of piculets. This is not highly endangered, but this is a threatened one from Southeast Brazil. This is the Ocraceus piculet. And this is a little bit more common one, the golden spangled piculet. And then this one is a woodpecker. And here it shows its adaptation. I like this picture because it's showing the stiff tail adaptation. And it's almost using it like a support, which is very interesting to see. Usually they use the tails to get support from branch, like when they're climbing on a branch. But here it's using that as a little prop. And then you can see its behavior, where it drills for a bug and then sticks its tongue out and grabs it. This is a Celeus group of woodpeckers, which are brownish. And this is a cinnamon woodpecker. And so here he managed to pull out a little grub from there. Another one of the Celeus. This is an endangered bird now. This is the Atlantic black-breasted woodpecker from the Atlantic rainforest. And then the big ones, so the stars of the family. These are the Camphiphilus woodpeckers. This is the same genus as our ivory-billed, which, as we now know, is extinct or probably extinct. But the same genus, there are several other woodpeckers in South America and Central America. This is the pale-billed from Costa Rica. This is the crimson crested. This is relatively widespread, very large birds. This is a very distant shot of a spectacular woodpecker of the same genus, the red-necked woodpecker. This is from the Amazon. And then this is a different genus, but looks very similar. This is the lineated woodpecker. So the lineated woodpecker is very closely related to our pileated woodpecker, the same genus, the Dryoscopus. And then flickers. This is the Colaptus genus. This is the Campo flicker from eastern Brazil and eastern South America, open country bird. This is a golden olive woodpecker, also same genus Colaptus. Again, you can see what its same behavior. And then finally, this is the Melanereptus or genus. I'm sure I'm murdering the name there, the Latin name, but this is the same genus as our acorn woodpecker. So this is a yellow tufted woodpecker. And finally, something that's related to a red-bellied woodpecker in North America. This is the Yucatan woodpecker, not Yucatan. This is the Yucatan form of the golden-fronted woodpecker. The Yucatan woodpecker is a different species. I like this photograph because you can see a different behavior here. They're going for fruit, and they're actually using their toes to grab on a twig, which is very different from what you see in typical woodpeckers. And now we're coming to the end here. So I did want to just show a few parrots. And this one, this is our Sunnyvale parrot. And this has been talk of the town lately because now it's a countable bird. This is the Mitred parakeet. We have that flock near Sunnyvale, and this came to our place when we were in Sunnyvale. This came to near our house. I took this picture. Mitred parakeet, but it's native to the Andes. But a couple of birds I wanted to show. These are the parrotlets, and this is a golden-tailed parrotlet, endangered bird from the Atlantic forest. When I took this picture a few years ago, this was one of the only decent pictures of the species. Now there are a few more. And so I had posted it, and this was used for fundraising for the habitat protection of this bird. So these are parrotlets, just tiny forms of parrots. And this is a spot-winged parrotlet, that Wayun's picture from our Ecuador trip. And this is still one of the very few shots of this. It's a relatively rare and, in fact, very rare parrotlet, not much is known about it. It's probably overlooked, but we were lucky enough to get this photograph to see them in behavior here, eating. And in fact, we saw them feeding. So this was an adult feeding a young. And so this is a significant shot because this sort of proves breeding in that area of Ecuador. And then this is a group of parakeets that is my favorite. This is called the Purhura parakeets. This is a genus. There are 30 species in this. And depending on the taxonomy, there are 20 to 30 species. Other than this one, which is a maroon-bellied, which is relatively widespread in the Atlantic forest of Brazil, all the other ones are in very small ranges. So I have seen only about 6 of them, but there are 30 of these. And as one genus, they're very similar in behavior. One of the things they like to do is they sort of sit together. So this is the maroon-bellied roosting together here. So this is a relatively common bird, like I said, but the other ones are much rarer. This is a maroon-faced. This is endemic to Brazil and much smaller range. It's not endangered, but it's rare. But then there are other ones which are extremely endangered. So this is north of the maroon-faced, and this is now a different species called the gray-necked parakeet. You can see the same color pattern, but it's a different species. And this is considered a highly endangered bird. This is only in one hilltop in northeast Brazil, in the Baturité Hills. And then you go all the way across the continent to the west coast of Ecuador, and you get another Purhura, which is highly endangered, or at least it's vulnerable. This is the white-necked parakeet. And you can see the same sort of pattern. They like to sit together. And here. And finally, the El Oro parakeet, which is, this one is absolutely critically endangered. And it's only known from one reserve, the Bonaventura Reserve. And the only reason it still exists is because the land was bought by the Hokutoco Foundation, and there may be a couple of 100 birds left. And you can see the same behavior of that genus. So, like I said, I've seen maybe 5 or 6. There are 30 more. So a lot more to see. There's like an endless variety of birds. We barely touched the surface today. We did the non-passerines, like the first half. We haven't even started talking about the passerine birds, which maybe we'll do it in the next talk. So with that, I'll stop. And, this is just to get your taste. So if we do come back for the non-pass, this will hopefully give you a quick teaser. These are the Tangara tanagers, which are all part of the passerine group. So I went a little bit long here, but thank you for your patience. I'll stop now.